Hello, everyone, and welcome to Insight Live, the IT Experts Take. I'm Jason Rader, your host, and today we'll be taking through the topic of managed security, the top 3 aspects for IT decision makers to consider. And with me, we've got some esteemed guests that are going to help us through this conversation. We have Stephen Walters, Senior Manager for Managed Services Portfolio, and Greg Davis, Senior Manager for Managed Security. Both work with me here at Insight. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, Jason. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you guys here. And Greg, I know you're a little challenged, so you'll unmute when you have to.
That's right.
Say hi.
Thank you.
Hey, no worries. And a minor delay. No worries. One of the things I wanted to kick off with, just to kind of start the conversation before we dive into our topic, was there was a survey that went out prior to the session. I want to bring that up real quick, where we asked folks what their company's largest cybersecurity concern is. And I think that'll kind of drive some of the things that we talk about here today. The options were data theft, insider threats, and phishing scams. And I wanted to get you guys' commentary on this after I tell you the results. So the highest one was data theft at 56%, then phishing scams at 33%, and then insider threat at 11%. Any comments from you guys on that? And I certainly will weigh in after you.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that mirrors a lot with what I talk to, clients and potential clients out there as well. When you think about data theft, you start to think about real financial, long-lasting impact potential to a business, right? I think that's one area where it can really go on long into the future, right? You may contain that threat, but once the data is out there, it's out there. So that definitely, I can see that being number one. Phishing is one that it's a continuous threat, and we all go through the training, right? And you have the phishing or the anti-phishing training modules out there, but it's something that I think you literally cannot repeat it enough to make people aware. It's just so common.
Any comments, Greg? Well, I'll weigh in a little bit while Greg's getting stuff sorted out. So, what I thought about the way that those were worded, and I think to your point, Stephen, is that data theft naturally is going to be the highest one because that kind of indicates that it's happened, right? The other things, phishing scams doesn't necessarily mean something happened yet, and insider threat doesn't necessarily mean something's happened yet. So I think in people's minds, data theft is it's gone and it's been thieved at that point, and now we've got to deal with all of the stuff that falls into play because of that, and having to work a lot as a CISO, having to work a lot with legal and HR and all the fun things that happen, and insurance, cyber insurance, and all the other things that happen related to things like this. That's bad news. So yeah. I think that it might have been the way we worded the survey, but whenever somebody says data theft, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's terrible, because now we've got to deal with it. What kind of data was stolen? All of those things, and that is an interesting lead in that I like to talk about when we talk about managed services, because is managed services, when we talk about that, is that something where somebody can just give up their responsibility for knowing where their data is and all of that kind of stuff? Or are you literally just transferring absolutely everything over to somebody else, or is it somewhere in between? I'm sure there's some shared responsibility here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic point there in question. I will answer it generically for managed services in general, right? We're talking about security, but anytime you have a managed service, it certainly does not mean that service comes in and fixes all of the problems that have existed for years, right? I mean, I can tell you that absolutely is not the case. So if you have a poorly architected solution and we come in and provide managed services, it's still a poorly architected solution. We'll tell you when it breaks and we'll try to get it back up and running, right? That's typically not what you want. So yeah, managed security, it does not alleviate the need to have eyes on all of your IT assets, architectures, the way that it's used, your data. You need to inspect and continually look at that. I think managed security really, it provides that consistent 24/7 kind of operationalization of keeping eyes on glass, making sure that when there are alerts, that come from a range of systems out there, that your response is timely, it's to an SLA, you know exactly what to expect, right? So I think in addition to bringing expertise and skill sets to the equation along with other things. So yeah, the managed security piece does not alleviate responsibility. It does not keep you from having to, you know, look at your architecture and fully understand your environment. Yeah, good question.
Good lead in. Greg, did you have anything to add to that? Sorry.
Yeah, I like to think of it as really peace of mind, right? Your managed security providers making those investments in the technology and in the human resources that maybe the client, you know, doesn't have the time or the budget to keep up with. You know, and with all the changes going on in the world, all the threats, it really boils down to you know, having that trusted partner that allows you to sleep good at night.
Or I'll accept that. So I think on the tails of that comment, what do you, when we're talking about managed security specifically, not just managed services, and you know, being a security guy, and I'm asking questions that I know pretty much my opinion on the answers that you guys are going to give, and I think we're all simpatico as far as that goes. But what's the catalyst? Why do a lot of people come to you, and why do you kind of have to educate them a little bit on, you know, what they're looking for might not necessarily be the right focus of the journey that they're on? Because we've had this conversation lots, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think I've had experiences where clients, and again, I would frame it this way, that if you are at the extreme top end of the equation, right, you have a huge IT staff, you have dedicated security resources, you have dedicated around the clock teams, like that's a different client, right? And they're typically not going to consume a prescribed managed service around security. But it's those clients that really don't have that, right? They may not even have any managed services in their organization at all, right? Maybe they have an appropriately sized or maybe slightly less sized like IT staff to deal with their IT infrastructure. And that's very typical. Managed security is a very natural fit for those types of organizations, because it would be impossible to build an effective security operation inside of an organization of that size. But what I typically see is those folks are used to looking at tools and kind of analyzing things on like, how can I buy certain things and insert them into my current infrastructure and operate them. And I really think that managed security is just such a great option to really separate those two things. You need those two things separated. And back to what Greg said, have that peace of mind that there is an organization that is built to run 24/7, that is built to respond within minutes on those events. And then back to the responsibility, right? Now you can engage your IT group that knows the infrastructure, knows the environment, and kind of coordinate an effective response to those incidents. So so that's kind of where I see that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, you know, hopefully you've got a partner that you work with along the way, because going out and, you know, security is hard. I say this all the time, and it's not. There's no, my famous thing that I would say is, there's no macaroni and cheese recipe for it. And I say that because everybody kind of gets what I'm saying there. There's no just straightforward, you buy this, you do this, boom, you know, you've got dinner. There are nuances to it. And I think when somebody comes to me and says, hey, we bought this, now how do we use it? You know, we maybe should have had that conversation a little bit earlier than that, because maybe they didn't need to buy this. Maybe they needed, you know, and I think I've heard you say, we help deliver an outcome. It doesn't really matter the technology, and that's one of the things I think it's a relief from a CISO perspective, I would assume, and just about anybody from an operational perspective, to kind of take the technology off the table that we've got to be concerned with, as long as, because, you know, the senior level, the board doesn't care what tech I'm using, honestly. They just care whether I'm delivering on the outcomes that I said I was going to deliver on.
Yeah. And that's great. You know, outcomes, that is the cornerstone of managed services, right? That it's all based on an outcome. The tooling, the resources behind it, the ongoing training, like all of those things are baked into the cake, right? And so you're getting that outcome without the worry of having to deal with that. If you take just one element of that, take hiring a highly skilled security professional and putting them in a role and keeping them interested, keeping them trained, keeping them moving forward, it is nearly impossible, right? I would say
any role, not just, I mean, any security role. And there's a lot of different ones, right?
It's tough for service providers to hire and keep and retain and train, right? That is an ongoing exercise forever. And so if you take just one of those elements and try to boil it down to like, well, can I go build this myself? It doesn't really make sense. Back to the outcomes. I would say this as well. You mentioned partner, and I think that is incredibly important to have a partner in this space and not something you subscribe to that is out there somewhere. I'm not really sure who it is, what they're doing, right? That's not an effective means to address the security needs, in my opinion. A partner and these outcomes are going to shift, change over time. So if you subscribe to a service today, you better believe that 12 months from now, there's going to be something new. There's going to be some new thing that you should be doing, thing you should be considering. And an effective partner in this space is going to be keeping up with that and continuing to evolve the offering to match where the industry is. And I think it's another area where when you start to do the math, those are expensive things to do, right? It's expensive from a resource perspective, time perspective, to keep up with that, to make sure that you have the right technologies put together in the right way to provide the right response. And back to the board, like the board seems like they'd be pretty happy to know that you have an outcome-based solution that's going to provide these things, right? And you can measure it and you know what it's going to cost and go forward with it.
Greg, anything to add there, sir?
Yeah, I think it's really important to touch on something that Stephen said. The service, you have to ensure that you've got a partnership, right? They have to know your environment. They have to know, the security footprint, because what happens when you need them, right? You don't want to waste time, educating them on, this is what we have, this is what we do, this is normal, this isn't, right? You can really get in a bind. So you want to ensure that you have a partner where they understand you trust that when you need them, they're going to be there, and that they're going to give you the type of response really that you're looking for.
Yeah, great point. And I think, we joked a little bit about kind of this going to Home Depot, like anybody can do this themselves, right? I don't think that we're trying to say that managed security providers have some magic that can't be let out of the bottle kind of thing. It's what it boils down to is it's something that people can do. Organizations can ingest new technology. They can hire people. They can train those people. They can retain those people. They can do and innovate. But all of those things that we're, doing it yourself. And we joked about going to Home Depot. I've done projects where I've gone to Home Depot. Hey, I could do this. Yeah, of course. I've seen my brother-in-law do this. I'm pretty good. And I show up, and then on my third trip in, they're like, "Hi, Mr. Rader, what did you forget?" And I'm like, and it's just turned into this thing that I hate. And now I just want to complete the job, and I didn't really do a great job. It's I'm certain that people can do this themselves, and so that's not us not having faith in our partnership with clients and what they're trying to do, but that's a lot of stuff. And especially, Stephen, you brought up a really important point that I want to come back on, because I had a conversation with the CISO of a major organization last week, and she was talking about we were talking about kind of our roles in our respective organizations, and I was talking about how innovative we are and how exciting we are and how we're, the corp feeds back into the business and the business feeds into corp. And it was really cool. And we were attracting top talent. And she's like, well, how can you help me? Because I'm not in that. I'm in a, production environment, manufacturing environment. How do we keep these folks excited? And I was like, wow, yeah, you could certainly still have passion and innovation in those spaces. But I think to that point, I don't have to have, if we're using managed security services, I'm not having those attrition conversations with my folks. I'm not having those hiring and all of those things that come into play with that, and that motivational aspect, which has become a huge focus in an organization like ours to retain and maintain those guys.
Yeah, exactly. I have actually also seen that play into the IT teammates within our clients' organizations, that they become energized when the business is willing to invest in some of these services that actually make their life better.
Totally.
I can tell you that having been in the trenches with clients going through, security incident response efforts, like it is ones that have planned and ones that have not. And I can tell you that when you have not, it wears out people very quickly, right? And I think having those services, I usually see them welcomed with open arms. It is not a threat to anyone's job or their position in the company. In fact, it bolsters it, in my opinion. It really does.
I think that's brilliant. And it's all about how you take the angle. Hey, we're partnering with these guys. They're going to augment us in this way. This enables you to, my own IT people, my own security people, to do the things that are most important and pertinent to the organization.
Right.
Love it. So let's talk a little bit about MDR, XDR. There's a lot of things that are flowing out there these days. And just in general, I think, we kind of headlined this conversation to say there's 3 things that folks should do to kind of deal with security threats. And obviously augmenting your organization with managed security is one of those ways. But let's talk about XDR, MDR.
Yeah, I'll take a run at it, Greg, and then you can add. I mean, I think that first, maybe we just quickly define it. I mean, I think, if we start with EDR, endpoint detection and response, and then you add MDR, MDR is just kind of a managed version of EDR, thinking about the endpoints, right? When you get into XDR, extended detection and response, you're really looking at many, many more things, right? So not thinking about just my laptops, my desktops, and maybe other end devices, but really infrastructure, all of it. So you get into XDR, and then you get into managed XDR, right? And so now, to some degree, these are, buzzwords, if you will, in marketing terms. But I think that really the important thing is, to me, that the scope, if you think about the scope, when you think endpoints is very limited scope, and you start to talk about XDR, then you start to talk about what does it mean to put a managed outcome around that, right? That's kind of the progression. And to me, it really just says we need to be looking at data coming from all sources, as many sources as possible, and then allow modern technology with AI and other great new things that are coming to bear to actually do the analysis and help to provide the feedback to the security teams. And that's where, to me, it's just the ever increasing advancement of the technologies are allowing us to be able to take in massive amounts of data, really, and do analysis very quickly, and not just provide, hey, there's a problem, but literally to provide, there's a problem, and these are some responses that we could take right now. So to take almost instant action against those things is extremely powerful, because back to the architecture, it's not that the platforms just go out there and magically do their thing. Like, they're pulling data from other systems and tools that are in place, that have been architected and put in place, right? So that's how I think about it. And I think it kind of goes back to the outcome versus tool discussion. You have to look at tools. You have to look at the point solutions. But at some point, you have to back up and say, 10 point solutions isn't going to cut it for me. I need an architecture, and I need something that's kind of beyond that, that's looking at my entire landscape.
Yeah, security's gone beyond that. I just have to look here.
The key point there is,
go ahead, Greg.
No, I was going to say, Stephen touched on the key point there. It's really taking a look at the entire network, right? Correlating relevant security data from endpoints, cloud, business systems, network, and being able to have a view into all of those systems, and then being able to logically take those, millions or hundreds of thousands of alerts, and through automation and AI, distill those down, hopefully into tens or hundreds of alerts, of which, only a few are really relevant and need to be investigated.
Yeah, agreed. On that point, Greg, I think probably the number 3 to our 3 things that help mitigate threats. Well, this doesn't necessarily mitigate it, but it mitigates your risk upon somebody getting into your organization would be like an incident response solution, right? And I think, Stephen, you alluded to earlier, the worst time to try to figure out how to handle an incident is during the incident itself, right? But I've been there. I've seen folks try to figure that out. And, you try to remain calm. Here's what we got to do. Boom, boom, boom. We got to follow these, methods, and we got to connect to all of these individuals, and we got to brief the execs and all that kind of stuff. That can be overwhelming if you don't have a plan. It can be overwhelming if you have a plan, but it can be very overwhelming if you don't. How do you guys help with that kind of stuff?
Go ahead, Greg.
I think it's really important when you're in that situation, even if you have the right skills, the right resources, by day 2, by day 3, by day 4, everyone is really tired and things are slipping. So it's important to have that trusted partner that can not only augment the staff, but keep track of what's going on, where you're headed, what needs to be done, what are the priorities. I think there's a ton of value in that.
Yeah, I think those kinds of
I'll add to that a little bit, Jason. Sorry to step over you there. I think that having it thought out in advance, and that could mean that you have a partner that provides a service, on retainer. They come in with a set of resources. It could mean that you have internal resources, but you have a documented incident response plan, and you know how to enact that. I think we're used to disaster recovery plans or business continuity plans. I mean, this is the same thing. If the event has happened and you don't have it, it's too late, right? And so even just small things, seemingly small things, like having an incident response manager that's going to run calls, know who to invite to calls, know cadence, send out notes, send out action items, like having just that is incredibly important. And if you don't have it planned in advance, you'll be struggling with those very seemingly simple things. So to me, it's about having it both documented and to know where your shortcomings are from a resource perspective or even skill set perspective, so that you have prearranged to have those people come in. So for instance, if you are having, let's say you have a breach of some type and you need someone that is expert level at, say, Active Directory, right? You may not have that resource on site. You may have an administrator, but you may not have an expert level that knows how to deal with it at that level. So having those types of skill sets sort of pre-identified and understand, like, who can I go to bring in the experts? So.
Yeah, I think, and again, having a partner that has, that's handling the managed security aspect of day-to-day operations, but also can tap the team from an incident response and a incident management and handling kind of aspect, and then tap the Active Directory experts or the other folks that you need to bring in. I think that's one of the things that makes me feel very confident in that partner who has all of those things that they can pull in, because it's way more than just the incident. It's the remediation following that, which is not usually the same team. And again, your employees that, an organization's employees, besides the managed folks, but their own employees, they never get those holidays back. They never get those 24-hour, 48-hour, 72-hour periods that they've worked back. And that weighs on them. And they don't, then they go right back to work, which the work hasn't slowed down in that entire process. And it's probably more. So again, I think having that plan from just a morale and talent perspective, maintaining those guys is that's an investment in and of itself, but also that confidence that you have. And a lot of organizations will work with you from a retainer service perspective, where you do pay to have these guys on retainer, but for that year, if you didn't need to use any of that for an actual incident, you could use it for some proactive services or something along those lines too.
Yep. Yeah, I think most partners are of the mindset that we want our clients to use those hours, right? We don't want to sell retainer services and have them never use it. We would rather use it to make their environment better, right? And continue to do that. It's not a one and done thing. We'll go on forever.
For sure. Well, guys, any kind of final thoughts? What we usually like to do at the end. So we kind of talked about those three things, but I think kind of in a summary, I think a lot of folks, what do they need to think about? So if they were thinking managed services was this technology play at the beginning of this discussion, what advice would you offer these guys moving forward and how they can think about differently on how to engage a partner and a managed services provider from a security perspective?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it is the ongoing partnership aspect to it. It is not a fixed service that you subscribe to that it's kind of keep it at arm's length, that it truly should be a partnership. And I think a good partner will help you think through those other things, right? It's not, well, here we've onboarded the service, have a nice day, we'll let you know if there's a problem. I think you really, a good partner will say, well, this is phase one, phase two is what is the response? How do we help you with that? What do you need internally? I think it's really thinking through the full stack. And I think a good partner will do that.
Nice. Greg, what are some things that folks need to look out for along with those lines, or not look out for, but think about as they're looking to talk to a partner in this particular case? How about Stephen? Maybe you answer that while Greg's getting sorted.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things in a partner, I think is the breadth of capability is important. I mean, you can have a partner that is 100% laser focused on one thing. You can have a partner that does many things, and I think there's pros and cons to both. One of the things I've seen is a partner that has many skill sets that can bring to the table is that when you do get into that incident response, and like my example, you do need to bring in the expert of a certain technology, that partner will have that capability to do that. And many times when I see the very narrowly focused partners, they would rely on others, right? So something to consider from a partnership perspective. Again, I think that having scale, the right size organization to go address the outcome is super important, and then having the breadth to really address the other areas, I think, is critical.
Yeah, I love it. We got a comment out there, and thanks everybody for your comments. From Dean, it says it's important to note, despite all the recovery plans in the event of disaster, it's important to be able to identify who's more resourceful for smooth navigation and resolution. And of course, I think that is correct. When you partner with an organization, managed service, security services, and your own, it's that, again, that partnership, which is why you don't want to just kind of black box it and let, they're handling it. It makes more sense to have that in place. We've had meetings beforehand. We've reviewed the plan beforehand. We know what we're going to do in this case, instead of, oh no, incident, how do we handle this stuff now? So very good point, Dean. Thank you for your comment. Greg, were you able to get some audio back there, sir? Doesn't look like it, but that's okay. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And again, managed services from a security perspective, I think, moving forward, there's not going to be an organization that doesn't probably engage in some level of managed services. From a security perspective, there's so many nuances to it. The talent market is so competitive right now and small that when we're starting to talk about these newer technologies that are going to be required to deal with the threats that are going on today, there's going to be some aspect. And I think having a partner with the flexibility and the breadth and depth to be able to innovate and do these kinds of things is a key element to decision-making regarding this kind of commitment. I think Stephen, Greg, you guys were awesome today. We appreciate it. We may come back depending on the comments and requests that we get from the session. Thanks for joining us. And you guys out there as well, if you want to know more about what we do, please visit us at insight.com/solutions. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks.